just, as I say, just like thank you so much for coming here today. As I say, we all understand how serious the situation is and how high the stakes are and how important it is that we kind of unite together to challenge that. And I'm sure that we are all feeling, and very rightly so, that the world has been hurtling towards nuclear war. Nuclear states are modernising, they're increasing their nuclear weapons. Globally, spending on war and nuclear weapons last year went to $2.7 trillion, and that's the steepest year-on-year rise for the last 3 decades. And we can feel that, can't we? And Trump's statements about restarting explosive nuclear testing has been a wake-up call that a new nuclear arms race is real and it is happening now. The Ukraine war has become the most serious nuclear flashpoint since the height of the Cold War, with this terrifying nuclear brinksmanship between the US and Russia. And it is shown to a whole new generation of people why nuclear weapons do not keep us safe, why they cannot be part of any civilized so-called defense policy, because they are holding the entire world to ransom. The defense of Ukrainian people has been cynically used to justify the huge increases in military spending and to promote the use of nuclear weapons. Britain argues it's expanding its nuclear capability and buying these F-35A nuclear fighter jets to, I quote, boost national security. It is the height of nuclear hypocrisy that countries like Britain must have nuclear weapons for their security and indeed threaten to use them against countries without them. And yet, of course, these nuclear jets offer no protection for the British population. On the contrary, they increase the risk of nuclear weapons being used, and they make us all a target. And this is because these jets can launch the US so-called battlefield nuclear weapons that have been designed to be used against troops, against conventional weapons, not in retaliation against a nuclear attack. So they are aggressive, not defensive. And their destructive power is 3 times the size of the Hiroshima bomb that killed over 200,000 people. Now, the jets will be under NATO, not British command. And Trump determines where and when these bombs are deployed. So this is nothing, absolutely nothing to do with national security. It is the opposite of national security. It is all about fighting in Trump's global war. Now, I'm sure a lot of us are getting our heads around Trump's 28-point plan and what this means. On the one hand, surely, if this plan brings about an end to the horrific conflict, this is a step in the right direction. If it ends the threat of nuclear war, that is a very big step forward. The fact that the plan refers to extending nuclear arms control treaties between the US and Russia, the countries with the largest nuclear arsenals, is also very important because these arms control treaties have pretty much all collapsed. But ultimately, this plan is backed by the threat of war and nuclear attack rather than securing peace. A central part of Trump's plan is Ukraine's so-called security guarantee. That is the huge levels of state resources and funding being harnessed for nuclear expansion and so-called war readiness. And the people, I'm sure, have been part of many of the discussions here today, especially in terms of education. We look at the role that the MOD is going to try and play in our education system. We can see how huge sections of our state resources and institutions are going to be harnessed for militarism. Now, European and British governments will continue to justify this deadly war drive and rearmament. That is my fear, that is my concern. So we have to unite to challenge this and stop it. Now, NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte has made clear that it is Europe that must secure these guarantees for Ukraine, so that the US can refocus its overwhelming military might towards China, to check China's economic growth and block its global influence. So, because the US can't compete economically with China, it is corralling all its allies into militarily confronting it. So, for instance, the newly elected Japanese Prime Minister is now reviewing the country's fundamental non-nuclear policies that would enable the US to use Japanese docks for its nuclear submarines and even to station nuclear weapons in that country. Just think about that. This is the country that suffered the horrors of the atomic bombings by the US and is now in a situation where it's under pressure to be changing that nuclear policy so that the US can threaten and attack other countries in that region. And the US is still outspending all the nuclear weapon states combined. Last year, out of the $100 billion that was spent on nuclear weapons, more than half of that was spent by the US. And the year before, the US accounted for 80% of the total increase in nuclear weapons spending. And all of this is to defend and sustain a world order that has just brought us this horrific genocide, the climate catastrophe that we're facing, the huge levels of austerity, the increase in the far right, and now, of course, these terrible nuclear threats. The idea of a nuclear war with Russia, let alone China, is absolutely terrifying. It would be the end of civilization. It would destroy huge swathes of the planet, and whoever would be left would be faced with famine from the destroyed ecosystem. As we all know, no one wins a nuclear war. And that is why our cause for nuclear disarmament has never been more urgent than it is today. And because the stakes are so high, the calls for nuclear disarmament and the alternatives to war and nuclear annihilation are growing. We know that the war drive is only worsening the real security issues we face, from climate breakdown, rising social deprivation, and as I say, the rise of the far right. And the interconnectedness of these crises is critical to us strengthening our chances to halt them all. So we need to better coordinate ourselves. That's my strong message. I think that's the strong message that we're all coming out with here. So how can we make this happen? We are part of a global movement that wants nuclear disarmament, and we need to strengthen that now, that global cooperation and solidarity. So keeping the US and Russia to their word on extending the START treaty, so basically to not increase their nuclear weapons, is absolutely critical. Re-establishing the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. This was the treaty that came in 1987, which was about banning those long-range missiles that have been used across Europe and escalating the situation so much. And getting the US, Russia and China to ratify the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty is absolutely urgent given Trump's statements. So building the global support for these is really, really important. April is the time for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the review conference, which is a big deal, and we should really use this as an opportunity to make that focus for these treaties. We know that people want a better future, and they want a better now. So pressure is building against the economic impact of the war drive and the out-of-control costs of the nuclear weapons industry. As Michaela has said, we need to build on the success of the trade union opposition to militarism as a way to drive economic growth and jobs. And as she says, I think the vote at TUC is incredibly significant because it also shows, again, the interconnectedness of our movements. It is because of the magnificent, the huge struggle of Palestinian people and of the movement to support Palestinian people against the genocide that put pressure on those trade unions to not support the further increase in defence spending, but to vote against it, because the work had been done to show that the genocide is completely interlinked with these profits that are being made by these arms companies. And so that was a big factor in why that policy was passed. So this is very significant and incredibly serious, because this is a key part of the government's way to try and sell war readiness to us, isn't it? We have the solutions to lifting people out of poverty, ending social deprivation, and building sustainable economic growth. And we need a national debate on the alternatives and the solution to war and nuclear weapons. And as Michaela was saying, the Alternative Defence Review is an absolutely brilliant tool for taking that debate out into the national public. We need to be working with the trade unions for defence diversification. So this is where you have, engineers who are working for British Aerospace are making wind turbines and not nuclear weapons. There is a real plan for economic growth that will lift people out of poverty and drive sustainable the energy sector and the public transport and education. These are sectors that can really drive economic growth and also provide the real sort of social network that we need and are absolutely critical for our very survival. These are totally linked with climate action and are driving real sustainable growth and making young people have an opportunity to have a future and to have real jobs that are decent jobs, that are safe jobs, that make them feel that they have some kind of future for us. The pressure is building against nuclear threats. People understand the real dangers of nuclear war, especially young people. I'm sure all of us have seen the polling of More in Common that shows it's overwhelmingly young people that understand how serious the threat is. And young people are incredibly active and engaged. Students have secured huge wins in divestment against Israel. They are organising actions against the arms industry investment that's being directed into universities, like in Sheffield. They're involved in very important divestment campaigning work as well. And of course, with the government's plans to strengthen arms and the nuclear industry links with education, it makes it even more critical that we support young people's campaigns against this, and as I say, for decent jobs. Pressure is building against the worsening impacts of climate change. People want action. The government's own committee, the Joint Intelligence Committee, says it is the biggest security risk that we face. We must work together and push for this report to be published and action to be taken on it. And we need to put the spotlight on the bases. We need to show the nuclear dangers and the social deprivation that's completely linked to them, to show that nuclear weapons don't make us safe. Dates for your diaries, which I'm sure you already have. RAF Marham on Saturday the 28th of February. That is an absolutely critical base. That's where these F-35A fighter jets are going to be based, but it's also the hub of the F-35 fighter jet programme, which we know that base has been used to transport F-35A parts directly to Israel, so it's completely complicit in the genocide there. Faslane, people might know Faslane, the nuclear site there where all the submarines are based. Huge levels of radioactive leakage that's really polluting that part of the world. Absolutely disgusting what's going on there. It's really critical that we put the spotlight on Faslane. There's going to be a demonstration on the 14th of March. Please all go to Scotland and take your solidarity. And then finally, Lakenheath. RAF Lakenheath is where there are now US nuclear bombs. These nuclear bombs that I was talking about, these battlefield nuclear bombs, they are based at RAF Lakenheath, this US base, where we have no accountability. We know how terrible that situation is. It's really important, again, that we are putting the spotlight on these bases, but also we are taking action to try and stop what's going on at those bases. So be part of that week-long peace camp that might well involve blockading, sitting down, stopping the action of that base. That's really important. And there's lots of other kind of effective work that you can do. And then finally, our task is to offer hope, isn't it? We are the ones that have the solutions. And we know that public protest has always secured the most progressive change in our society, and it has secured nuclear disarmament. It has forced those political leaders, when they didn't want to disarm their nuclear weapons. It has forced the US to, pull its nuclear weapons out of Britain on many occasions. So we have to recognise that, and recognise that we are part of this very rich, strong, successful tradition of public protest and political protest in this country. So, we are united. We should be feeling powerful about the situation. As I say, the stakes are so high, but more and more people understand how serious the situation is and want to come together. So let's get involved, all of us come together, let's work flat out to bring all of these movements together and to speak with one voice, offering the solutions and the hope for a better future. Thank you.